Hello everyone, welcome to the fourth branch program, a place for common sense. Today is Thursday, July 25th, 2019. I am MD. We have one specific program today. As you may recall, on Tuesday we mentioned that we will no longer be doing the reading of the Mueller report, and the reason is because yesterday Mueller was on Capitol Hill to talk about what else? His report. He was the architect of the report. So today we'll do just a recap of what we learned yesterday, and we'll ask the most important question. If you stick with me in just 60 seconds. Thank you for sticking around. If you've been here before, thank you. Your participation makes the journey a little bit lighter, a tad more bearable. If you join us for the first time, once again, welcome to the fourth branch program. The fourth branch program is not associated with any political party, and we at the fourth branch do not have any political aspiration or agenda. Our ultimate objective is to perfect the union, and in order to do so, we ought to remove the biggest obstacle of all: ignorance. JFK said that the ignorance of one voter in a democracy impairs the security of us all. Thus, the importance to eradicate ignorance from our society. Welcome once again. You may receive shortly, or you may have already received, a statement to the fact of anyone cares about security. Depending on your age bracket, you may recall the tragedy of 9/11 in the United States of America. It happened in 2001, September 11, 2001. And just a couple of months ago, you may have seen Jon Stewart in Capitol Hill pleading with lawmakers, legislators, to help those firefighters, policemen, etc., who helped during that tragic day. Excuse me. Now, notwithstanding the fact that it happened in 2001, this in 2019, which means almost 2 decades later, the lawmakers, the legislators, whose job is to attend to affairs of the people, didn't see any urgency in making certain that those individuals and their families are taken care of. It took many years of pleading by Jon Stewart to get something to be done. And sadly, in the process, the individual who was pretty much the face of that group, those who fought to remove people from debris, those who fell sick, and that guy, I believe, suffered from cancer, and he died a couple of weeks ago. Didn't even get a chance to see that the United States senators fully controlled, the Senate fully controlled by Republicans, tried the best that they can for as long as they can to prevent those individuals from receiving any compensation to help them with their hardship, especially those who have fallen sick. But that aside, that's not really the reason I brought it up. It's just to give you another example as to what exactly do we think those individuals in Washington, especially, it's everything always boils down to politics. But one thing is certain: if you've been watching this program, we've been giving you example after example that for a reason that I've yet to understand, whenever it is something that would benefit the people, you can almost rest assured your Republican representative will oppose that. I'm not sure I understand the rationale, because you would think someone who is elected to attend to the affairs of the people, and when the people need them, then they would take care of the people. But it's time and again, and as I mentioned in this program before, we have 100 years, a century of data that prove beyond a shadow of a doubt what we just said, that every time that there is something to be done, legislation, resolution, anything that would benefit the people, Republican legislators always go against it. Not just talking about that, yesterday that Robert Mueller was on Capitol Hill sounding the alarm about the fact that in 2016 a foreign government, the United States of America, number one enemy, interfere in our election. But also he mentioned that as he was talking, that those type of activities were still ongoing by the same country, Russia. And you know what happened after that? There was a bill, a legislation in the Senate to fund the system in order to strengthen protection, to strengthen the country from cyber war by Russia or any other country. Guess what? The Republican killed it. Now ask yourself the question, why? Why would something that would protect the country, that would protect the integrity of our government, the integrity of our election, why would anyone decide to kill it? Now, don't get me wrong, if you listen to them, there are plenty of rationale. They'll tell you that God spoke to them. It's not a good idea. I'm kidding about that, but just to make a point. When 9/11 happened, a total of 3 commercial airlines were hijacked by terrorists, mostly from Afghanistan under the Bin Laden leadership, hijacked commercial airliners, and one was flown directly into the Twin Tower in Manhattan. One fell in somewhere in Pennsylvania, and the other one actually hit the Pentagon. And according to when they put all the casualties together, it was over 3,000 people dead on that day, and there were a score of others injured. This is not even to take into account the financial casualties that particular day and ensuing days cost to the country. But here's my question for you. Who was responsible to protect us from 9/11? Who was responsible to prevent it from happening? And most importantly today, who is responsible to protect the country? When we return. Live from New York City, at the top of the hour, every weekday from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m., the 4th French presents discussions, debates, commentaries on social, political issues, current events, sports, entertainment, religion, education, science, and every Saturday at 10:30 a.m. for a full presentation on controversial issues such as abortion, homosexuality, war on blacks. Are Republicans dumber than Democrats? Information which might irritate you, make you cry, make you laugh, but above all, will make you smarter. Join us every time. It is the right thing to do. It is the only way to keep your sanity in a world of chaos, hypocrisy, immorality, and deception. Welcome to Common Sense. So the question is, when September 11, 2001 tragedy happened, who was responsible to protect the United States of America? Who was responsible to protect the citizen of the country? You see, despite all the noise, all the outrage that Republicans in general tend to have when it comes to government, we want smaller government. We don't want government involved in this. We don't want government involved in that. In fact, the rationale behind they don't want government in anything is mind-boggling sometimes. And yet, as citizens of the United States of America, we know it is the government job to protect the country, to protect our institution, to protect the citizen of the country. In fact, I don't know there is anyone when something as tragic as 9/11 happened that would not look up to the government for answers. And there are two main reasons for that. Is because we trust, we put our faith on the system of government we have. You go to any country that does not have a system of democracy, people are left to fend up for themselves, because the authoritarian, the dictators are concerned about one thing and one thing only: to protect the regime from any attack, foreign attack and domestic attack, because anyone who is not with the authoritarian regime is not a friend. Whether you're a citizen of the country or you're a visitor, if you're not with that regime, protecting, talking good about it, praising, you are an enemy. Here in the United States, we trust. Now, we have our own issue with our government, because the government is not perfect, and it is okay for citizens of the country to criticize the government. That doesn't mean they don't love the country, because every time there is a citizen, an American citizen, who criticizes America, and all of a sudden Republicans get on their high horse, they don't love the country. Which is very ironic, because the other day, a couple of days, that Donald Trump was in the news claiming that the 4 congresswomen who were criticizing the state of affairs in the country, he claimed that those people don't love the country. Now, contrast that, if you will, with Donald Trump that's sleeping with our enemy, that's inviting our enemy in, that's collaborating with our enemy, and that person loves the country? Sometimes I don't know what kind of, where exactly the logic come from. I don't know if the idea of calling it logic is not even crazy on my part, because logic is something that ought to make sense. Now you have American citizen criticizing the way that things are being done by an administration, which is actually okay, because that's how we improve our country. If you're doing bad things and nobody ever said anything, there is no improvement that's gonna happen. Yes, criticizing the United States of America is actually good to make it better. So when you have the President of the United States telling a crowd that cheering on top of it that those people do not love, when it is factual that the President of the United States has collaborated with the United States #1 enemy, has passed information to the United States #1 enemy, and is still doing that as of date. Yes, you heard correctly. An article that came not too long ago on The Hill. By the way, The Hill is a Republican publication. Yes, you heard correctly. An article that came a couple of days ago pointed to Rudy Giuliani and Jay Sekulow that currently being used as operative to have a link with Ukraine in order to get information from a foreign government to pass to Trump. Sometimes it is mind-boggling that he is the guy that says he never had anything to do with foreign government, right? And yet, before that investigation even ended, he already had people in place doing exactly the same thing. I don't know if anybody believed that Donald Trump had nothing to do with Russia. Of course, most of Donald Trump supporters keep claiming it's a hoax, it's a witch hunt. Now, here it is. Someone who's been saying there is nothing, now he already has. You see the time? He already has 2 of his people opening back channel for exactly the same thing he was defending not having anything to do with. You know what happened to criminals? When they get away with something, they continue doing the same thing. In fact, people who are not used to commit crime, the first time they try to do something that may not even be a crime, illegitimate, something that's immoral, the minute that they get caught, they know from that point on, this is done, this is over. They're not going to try it. In fact, there are a couple of examples that doesn't elevate to crime. It's truancy. There are a lot of truants. Truants are children that sent to school. Their parents think they go to school, but in fact they on the street doing whatever they doing, but their parents would not know that. They are called truants. Now there is program that try to prevent or to decrease the occurrences of those things, which means trying to prevent those children from staying on the street, but rather to go to school. And it is a fact documented by those sites that take care of that problem, meaning trying to decrease truancy in the country, that whenever there is one of those truants, whenever one of those happen to have done it the first time, maybe followers, and caught the first time, that individual, that kid, would never show up on the truancy list again. That is a fact. That's not something I'm just telling you. If that kid tried the first time and get caught, it is a given that kid will never try that again. But the others, they're pretty much used to it. They get caught, so what? You call my parent, I'll do it again. And sure enough, you see their name appearing on the list over and over and over and over. That's how bad people who are used to doing bad things, there is nothing that's going to stop them. As such, we know that the behavior by Donald Trump, there is only people in Donald Trump camp may have believed him, despite the fact that it is pretty obvious that everything that comes out of his mouth is a lie. But people with common sense know that Donald Trump was lying. And sure enough, because things didn't get bad enough for him, he already has his own people doing exactly the same thing that he said he had nothing to do with in 2016. And that's not reported by, the fake news. It was reported by, guess what? I guess maybe one of my callers are trying to reach me. Who knows? Anyway, let's see if I can turn that off, because we wouldn't want it to disturb again. Now, before the Mueller testimony on Capitol Hill, a couple of days prior, an article published in the Hill. Again, as I mentioned, the Hill is a Republican publication. So it's not one of those, fake news that Trump always complains about. Yes, it is a Republican publication. And it says Ukrainian officials and Giuliani are sharing back channel campaign information. Now, I don't know about other places that you listen to and it just knows. You listen to it and you say, all right, okay. What we try to do here is not to tell you about news, because you can get that anywhere. What we do here is to put in perspective the impact of the behavior of our elected officials. And you, the constituent, if you care about the country, then you can do something about it. So we're not just doing it for the sake of, another voice telling you about what's going on in the world. There are enough of such. We decided to use a different approach, to use news to talk about legislation, resolution, using the prism of common sense in order to show you the impact of not only what those legislators are doing, those elected officials, but what if you, the constituent, you can or should do if you actually care about the country. Now, I paused the question before. Does security matter? Anyone cares about security? Well, when 9/11 happened, everybody in the country look up to the government for answers. It was bad enough, so our question was, can it happen again? Is it going to happen again? What are you going to do to prevent it from happening? All that, we trust that's what our government would do. And the reason is because we trust that the President of the United States, we trust that the lawmakers in Washington, congressmen, senators, whether they're Democrat or Republican, we trust that the oath that they took to protect and defend, they're going to put it in practice. They're going to implement that. But as you should know by now, a lot of those people that you elect in office, they couldn't care less about the country. And I'm not saying that just for the sake of saying that. I've been giving you example, because it's one thing to accuse someone of not loving the country, because anybody can say that. But here at the Fort Branch, we always take care to give you example to show, to prove what we are talking about. Which means we want you to understand that we're not just saying those words because, well, we damn liberal, as Republicans always put it, but because there is an urgency in a particular case that requires your attention, that requires your support, that requires your interest. Nine 9/11 happened. If it happened, if another such tragedy happened, who would be responsible? Do you care that it happened again? That's a question. And the question is actually a great question, and the reason is because We are currently witnessing something probably as or even more tragic than 9/11 evolving right under our eyes, and Republican lawmakers shrug it off. Robert Mueller went to Capitol Hill yesterday. Of course, he said a lot of things. People talked about him about a lot of things, including his performance and so on and so forth. But there is one common theme. He warned that the country is still in danger of Russia interference. I'll give you just a quick taste of exchanges between Robert Mueller and the two chairmen of the committee who presided the committees yesterday. Now, something you've seen before over and over, you heard people talk about it, you heard people making comment about it, and we do not, again, as I mentioned earlier, we do not discuss those things here for the sake of discussing them, because you can go and get your dosage of whatever you're after to watching your preferred network. But if you want to hear something good about what happened yesterday, you tune into Fox, and Fox will tell you all the good things that happened, and they will bash every attempt by the Democrat lawmakers to hold the executive branch accountable. Now, if you want to hear how bad it was, then you could tune into other channels, maybe NBC, and hear all the bad things that happened yesterday. Here at the fourth branch, what we try to do is to analyze those things through the prism of common sense, but more specifically, to try to bring forth the impact of what you saw, of what you heard, of what Robert Mueller said, and what does it mean for the United States of America. But keep in mind this question: does it matter to you that another tragedy such as 9/11 happens again in the United States? Do you care? Let's take a look. Maybe that can give you some perspective. Let's take a look.
Director Mueller, the President has repeatedly claimed that your report found there was no obstruction and that it completely and totally exonerated him. But that is not what your report said, is it?
Correct. It is not what the report said.
And now, reading from page 2 of volume 2 of your report that's on the screen, you wrote, quote, "If we had confidence after a thorough investigation of the facts that the President clearly did not commit obstruction of justice, we would so state. Based on the facts and the applicable legal standards, however, we are unable to reach that judgment," close quote. Now, does that say there was no obstruction?
No.
In fact, you were actually unable to conclude the President did not commit obstruction of justice. Is that correct?
Well, we, at the outset, determined that we, when it came to the President's culpability, we needed to go forward only after taking into account the OLC opinion that indicated that a president, sitting president, cannot be indicted.
So the report did not conclude that he did not commit obstruction of justice. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And what about total exoneration? Did you actually totally exonerate the president?
No.
Now, in fact, your report expressly states that it does not exonerate the president.
It does.
And your investigation actually found, quote, multiple acts by the president that were capable of exerting undue influence over law enforcement investigations, including the Russian interference and obstruction investigations. Is that correct?
Correct.
Now, Director Mueller, can you explain in plain terms what that finding means so the American people can understand it?
Well, the finding indicates that the president was not exculpated for the acts that he allegedly committed.
In fact, you were talking about incidents, quote, in which the president sought to use his official power outside of usual channels, unquote, to exert undue influence over your investigations. Is that right?
That's correct.
Now, am I correct that on page 7 of volume 2 of your report, you wrote, quote, the president became aware that his own conduct was being investigated in an obstruction of justice inquiry. At that point, the president engaged in a second phase of conduct involving public attacks on the investigation, non-public efforts to control it.
I think you get the gist. Robert Mueller, before I said something about Robert Mueller, let me point out what the Republican lawmakers said after the hearing. When Jim Jordan, McCarthy were asked as to whether they were concerned at all about what Robert Mueller said, they said no. In fact, they actually said no. Remember I mentioned earlier, legislators, lawmakers, you elect them to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States. Now, if the people you elect do not do that, and this is where I am really at a disadvantage understanding the rationale in the Republican circle. If you hire someone to do a job and the person cannot do the job, would you keep that individual on? Now, Robert Mueller, I don't have to give you his whole credential because that was established during the hearing, and of course it's public information. But one thing you ought to know about Robert Mueller, no matter what you heard, everybody in Washington, no matter who, has the utmost respect for Robert Mueller. We know that because when Robert Mueller was appointed special counsel, there was not a single individual, and by not a single individual, I mean not a single individual except Donald Trump. I guess I should add that, who objected to his appointment. Everybody, Republican, all Republicans, had nothing but praise for him. Robert Mueller is a long-time Republican. He's never been a Democrat before. He's never courted the idea. Has been a Republican all his life. But one thing Robert Mueller has also been is a patriot. Whatever he does for the sake of the country. That doesn't mean Robert Mueller is perfect. But he is one of the few patriots left who fully embrace the notion of patriotism as his compass. He doesn't look into politics. In fact, I remember very clearly I published an article before and I said Robert Mueller does not aspire to politics, and a Republican answer, how would you know that? Robert Mueller doesn't like the spotlight. He doesn't like to speak. But he's very good at what he does. He was FBI director under Republican, and even when Obama became president, Obama extended, usually whenever a president of a new administration occupy the Oval Office, they tend to get rid of a lot of people, including FBI director, CIA director, because they want to put their own people there. That didn't happen with Robert Mueller. Obama asked him to stay on. Because the idea is about the United States of America, not about a political party, not about an individual. So the question that I asked earlier, does it matter to you that we may have another tragedy of 9/11 happen? Does it matter to you? And I ask the question is because if you watch the Mueller testimony yesterday, you cannot not be alarmed by the fact that the same Russia who interfered in the 2016 election is still doing that. That's number one. And number two, as I just pointed out to you, as published on the Hill, Ukrainian official and Giuliani are sharing back channel campaign information. It is very difficult to claim patriotism when those things are okay by you. Now, how do you square that Donald Trump pretend to like the country? Because that's what he's been saying all along. He's been saying it with his mouth, but as I always mention to anyone that cares to listen, whenever Donald Trump says anything, consider that for you, if you're doing analysis about anything, that is one less item to worry about, because you don't have to worry about what Donald Trump says, because it is a lie. There is no if and but about it. Sometimes it becomes very, very, very obvious quickly. Other time it may take a couple of days, a couple of weeks. But the reality is, whatever Donald Trump says is a lie. So I don't waste my time listening to Donald Trump, dissecting what Donald Trump says, because I already know this is just a lie. Regardless, he's Donald Trump saying that, accusing those 4 women of not loving the country because they criticize the country. It is their job. It is the job of every American to criticize what's wrong with the United States of America. It is the job, because that's the only way you can make anything better, by making sure you point out the flaws, the mistakes. There is nothing wrong with that, and that doesn't make anyone less patriot. But one thing is certain, if you're inviting our number one enemy in, you in bed with our number one enemy, you collaborating with our number one enemy, then you cannot call yourself a patriot. That's a dilemma. Every day I wake up and I try to understand. In fact, in this program, you would find that sometimes I do use insulting language. Not because I want to insult, but because that's the only way I can see to explain a phenomenon. Because how do you explain that you have an individual that's been for the past 2 years, it's been obvious, it's not something that's hidden, it's been obvious for 2 years that Donald Trump has been doing everything that's damaging to the United States of America, to our national security. He has pretty much destroyed our institution, shredded our Constitution, and yet we continue to think it is okay. Well, when I say we, not we, the Republicans, continue to think it's okay. What exactly do they want? What that kind of country do they want to leave for their children, their grandchildren? The Hill started the article that way. 2 operatives reporting to President Trump attorney Rudy Giuliani established a back channel between him and Ukrainian officials. The name of the operatives are Lev Parnas and Igor Fruman met with top figures in Ukraine and set up meeting for Giuliani in an attempt to gather information to use in the 2020 presidential election. In the 2016, I clearly said that those who were cheering for WikiLeaks to release information and interfere in our election cannot claim patriotism. At that time, I didn't even know that WikiLeaks was in bed with Russia. But it was sufficient for me to know that WikiLeaks is not in the interest of America. Now we have blatantly an individual who's been Donald Trump attorney. Now he is now the bridge to pass and collect information from a foreign government. But Donald Trump spent a good deal of his time saying that the investigation is a witch hunt. Which country do you have loyalty for? That's the question. Because you cannot claim to be a patriot and at the same time you're okay with those things happening. And the more those information come to the surface, the more I ask myself the exact same question about Democrats. The framers of the Constitution did set rules, did set parameters in order to hold the executive branch accountable. In fact, one of the priorities that the legislative branch, meaning Congress and the Senate, one of their top priority is to exercise oversight on the executive branch, meaning the president. If you're not for the United States of America, which country are you for? Because claiming that you're a patriot, putting your hands on your chest during national anthem doesn't make you a patriot. But supporting an individual who is openly unpatriotic towards the country, that is a question to ask yourself. Why would you continue to support that individual? I heard all kind of rationale. Yesterday, Jim Jordan, when asked the question if what he just heard was of no concern to him, he said no, because we have a great economy. Under Bill Clinton, so far, of all the great things we've been hearing about the economy, the best time, financial time the country has had was under Bill Clinton. That was for the first time that the country had a balanced budget, a surplus. And yet, Republicans did not have any problem impeaching Bill Clinton. So the idea that a great economy is the answer doesn't justify any of that. It's like someone saying that, well, I know my daughter is married to a mobster, but we're doing great. We're having a great time. And which means the wrongdoing is justified? That's the Republican rationale. The economy is great. I mentioned to you before, there are 100 years of data that show unequivocally that your Republican representative, the lawmakers, they do not care an iota about the constituent or the country. Because everything that they do always against the constituent and sometimes against the United States of America. And we are living such moment today where we see the Republican representative can rationalize anything in order to continue to support an individual who did not just do. Keep that in mind. Donald Trump was not just involved in collaborating with our enemy in 2016, but he's doing that right now, according to an article published in The Hill. The title of the article is Ukrainian officials and Giuliani are sharing back channel campaign information. Yes, it's happening right here, right now. So Donald Trump get emboldened. He did it before, it worked. He's doing it again because you, the constituent, and the legislator, the representative, the Republican representative, say it's okay. We don't have a problem with that. How is that for patriotism? Which country is your loyalty for? Because you cannot say it's to the United States of America, because you already proven that you don't care what happened to the United States. You cheer the idea of a foreign government involvement because you did it before, and my suspicion is you'll do it again. It is exhausting, to see that people in the country, millions of people who pretend to be patriots, couldn't give a hoot about the country. It is quite exhausting. Let's take a look at Adam Schiff having a short conversation with Robert Mueller, shall we?
Dr. Mueller, your report describes a sweeping and systematic effort by Russia to influence our presidential election. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And during the course of this Russian interference in the election, the Russians made outreach to the Trump campaign, did they not?
That occurred over the course of, that occurred.
It's also clear from your report that during that Russian outreach to the Trump campaign, no one associated with the Trump campaign ever called the FBI to report it. Am I right?
Don't know that for sure.
In fact, the campaign welcomed the Russian help, did they not?
I think we report in the report indications that occurred, yes.
The president's son said when he was approached about dirt on Hillary Clinton that the Trump campaign would love it.
That is generally what was said, yes.
The president himself called on the Russians to hack Hillary's emails.
There was a statement by the president in those general lines.
And numerous times during the campaign, the president praised the releases of the Russian-hacked emails through WikiLeaks.
That did occur.
Your report found that the Trump campaign planned, quote, a press strategy, communications campaign, and messaging, unquote, based on that Russian assistance.
I am not familiar with that.
That language comes from Volume 1, page 54. Apart from the Russians wanting to help Trump win, several individuals associated with the Trump campaign were also trying to make money during the campaign and transition. Is that correct?
That is true.
Paul Manafort was trying to make money or achieve debt forgiveness from a Russian oligarch.
Generally, that is accurate.
Michael Flynn was trying to make money from Turkey.
True.
Donald Trump was trying to make millions from a real estate deal in Moscow.
To the extent you're talking about the hotel in Moscow?
Yes.
Yes.
When your investigation looked into these matters, numerous Trump associates lied to your team, the grand jury, and to Congress?
Number of persons that we interviewed in our investigation, it turns out, did lie.
Mike Flynn lied?
He was convicted of lying, yes.
George Papadopoulos was convicted of lying?
True.
Paul Manafort was convicted of lying?
True.
Paul Manafort was, in fact, went so far as to encourage other people to lie?
That is accurate.
Manafort's deputy, Rick Gates, lied?
That is accurate.
Michael Cohen, the president's lawyer, was indicted for lying?
True.
He lied to stay on message with the president?
Allegedly by him.
And when Donald Trump called your investigation a witch hunt, that was also false, was it not?
I'd like to think so, yes.
Your investigation is not a witch hunt, is it?
It is not a witch hunt.
When the president said the Russian interference was a hoax, that was false, wasn't it?
True.
When he said it publicly, it was false?
He did say publicly that it was false, yes.
And when he told it to Putin, that was false too, wasn't it?
That I'm not familiar with.
When the president said he had no business dealings with Russia, that was false, wasn't it?
I'm not going to go into the details of the report that along those lines.
But when the president said he had no business dealings with Russia, in fact, he was seeking to build a Trump Tower in Moscow, was he not?
I think there is some question about when this was accomplished.
Well, you would consider a billion-dollar deal to build a tower in Moscow to be business dealings, wouldn't you, Director Mueller?
Yeah, absolutely.
In short, your investigation found evidence that Russia wanted to help Trump win the election, right?
I think generally that would be accurate.
Russia informed campaign officials of that?
I'm not certain to what conversations you're referring to.
Well, through an intermediary, they informed Papadopoulos that they could help with the anonymous release of stolen emails?
Accurate.
Russia committed federal crimes in order to help Donald Trump?
When you're talking about the computer crimes in the charge in our case, absolutely.
The Trump campaign officials built their strategy, their messaging strategy around those stolen documents?
Generally, that's true.
And then they lied to cover it up?
Generally, that's true.
If you are a patriot, you cannot not be outraged because this is not a matter of being Democrat or being Republican, because the very reason that our democracy survives is because of that very structure of our government. The minute that you don't have any oversight, then at that point, the idea of democracy in the United States of America ceases to exist. So if you are a Republican and you think it's okay, then you too are no patriot. There is no other word of saying it. No matter what you hear people saying, trying to sugarcoat, trying to go around to explain it to you, that's all it means. If you are okay with what is currently going on with Donald Trump, with the Republican Party, you categorically are not a patriot. And no matter what you think of yourself, you are not a patriot. Because a patriot is someone who would give up, who would make sacrifice sometimes of his or her own life, let alone sacrifice a political party in order to preserve the democracy, in order to preserve the Constitution, in order to preserve the rule of law. So if you cannot do that, don't talk to anyone about being patriot, because you are no patriot. Are you a patriot? Well, I asked the question a different way earlier. Which country do you have allegiance to? And I don't mean in words, because anybody can say anything about anything. But I mean in your action. Which country do you have allegiance to? For which country do you have loyalty? Because as it stands today, the United States of America is at a crossroad. You have the Democrats who try to do the duty for which they were elected, which is to exercise oversight on the executive branch. And you have the Republicans who are gung-ho, doing everything to derail that. Now they call it politics, and that's how they usually sell it to you, but it's not politics. When it comes to the affairs, to the security of the country, no matter what you feel about any individual, should be secondary, because the country should come first. The country should matter first, should matter more. If you cannot make that distinction, we can say without any ambiguity that your contribution to our society is nil, zero, zilch. When the framers of the Constitution crafted that document, they relied on a number of factors. The first one, they rely on the fact that the legislative branch, Senate and Congress, would hold the executive branch accountable. And that did not matter to them which political party is in control. Well, they didn't have the foresight to see that there could be a time when a political party, all the members of that political party, would relinquish that duty. The oath of office they took, they all shred it under their feet. They trample it under their feet. as far as the Constitution of the United States, you cannot talk about the Constitution of the United States because the Republican congressmen and senators have already made light of the fact that it doesn't matter. Now, the second aspect that the framers of the Constitution had as a stopgap to prevent the bleeding is the people. You know, the constituent, those who would have better understanding, who would care more about the country, and get rid of those lawmakers who would not do the affairs of the people. You know that? Well, that was also, there was some flaws there because they could not possibly anticipate that all the constituents in a political party would also be blinded and support all those individuals who are actually hurting the country. They could not see that coming. So as such, we submit to you that there is a necessity, there is an urgency for the revision of our Constitution. Because if you gradually, if you fast forward what we're observing today, we're not too far away from being even worse than an authoritarian regime or a dictatorship. Because if when you have Republican in power, everything that Republican administration does is okay, which means who is going to exercise oversight? To conclude, I'll finish with this. World War II happened because of one individual, Adolf Hitler. Yes, when you hear about Hitler, you call him a monster. There are a lot of names that Hitler had. He was a dictator and so on. But you know what part of the story is never told whenever we talk about Hitler? Is the complicity of Congress and the Senate. Well, more specifically, Reichstag and Reichsrat. Those were the equivalent in Germany of what we have here. They weren't called Congress and the Senate, but that's the same bodies. They call Reichsrat and Reichsrat. Reichstag and Reichsrat. Equivalent here, Congress and the Senate. That's the story that's never told when they talk about Adolf Hitler. Everybody always points fingers to Adolf Hitler. But Reichstag and Reichsrat were complicit in what happened. They were the one who crafted legislation that gave Adolf Hitler plenary power. So for some reason, historians do not put much emphasis on that, but it is most important because of one difference between Adolf Hitler and Donald Trump. Adolf Hitler went by the book. Yes, he respected the Constitution of Germany. So that's why he lobbied Reichsrat and Reichstag to pass a legislation, an act, call it the Enabling Act of 1933 or 34, one or the other. Guess what? Reichstag and Reichsrat were the one who passed that. So they were very much complicit in what Adolf Hitler was doing. Here in the United States, both the Republican Congress and the Senate are complicit in what currently is going on in the executive branch. So when you see those type of problems, don't look at the other side. Don't try to point fingers to the Democrats. Look in the mirror and see exactly what's going on within your own political party. Because as it stands today, your Republican legislators are doing everything humanly possible to destroy the very Constitution that we have. And little by little, they're doing exactly that. Well, I hope you had taken something from this presentation. If not, you already know what to do. Send us your comments, your criticism, your suggestion. Let us know how to do it better. As I've always said, this program is not going anywhere. You might as well help make it better. In the meantime, if you should have a particular topic you would like us to talk about, to discuss, to debate here, let us know. We will research it. We will debate it right here on the Fourth Branch program, the place for common sense. I hope you have a wonderful afternoon or evening, whichever it happened to be. I hope you can join me again tomorrow at 10:30 a.m. Have a wonderful afternoon. That was an update through the prism of common sense. Join us again tomorrow at 10:30 a.m. for a full presentation. I am MD, host of the Fourth Branch program, the place for common sense. Send us comments, criticism, suggestion, or simply let us know how we're doing. Thank you for watching. Have a wonderful afternoon. See you next time.